Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the meeting of the Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny Committee. As usual, this meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council website, and it will also be available for viewing after the meeting. Can I please ask all members and officers have their microphone on mute until they wish or are invited to speak. I have received apologies from Mr. Gattatoria today, and we have Mrs. Page as a substitute. I have also received apologies from Carolyn Scheuer. Most of you would know as Mrs. Lewis. His name and position, well, just her name has changed. I would like to welcome Tim Brown, the new Assistant Director for Education, Send and Inclusion in Children and Family Services. As it's Tim's first time joining us, it would be useful for members to introduce themselves. So I'm now going to work around. Very welcome, Tim. So I'm Hilary Fryer, County Councillor for Barrow and Corn, and I'm the chair of this committee. If I go round to my left.
I'm Sue Jordan, County Councillor for Blaby and Glenparva.
Max Hunt, County Councillor for Loughborough North West.
You know, Mrs. Taylor and Mr. Smith, so I won't ask them to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, Richard Allen, Division Member for Earl Shelton.
Hello, welcome. I'm Rosita Page, Division Member for Littleworth and surrounding villages.
And I'm Ross Hills, Member for Mallory and Deputy Chair of the committee.
Thank you. You won't remember it all, but that's why we wear badges. Right. Item 1, the first item on today's agenda is the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of January 2025. I move that these are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Mr. Hills. Agenda item 2 is question time. I have received no questions from members of the public. Item 3, I have received no questions from members. Item 4, I have no urgent items. Item 5 is declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest that they wish to declare? No. 2. Item 6, declarations of party whip. Do members wish to declare the party whip? We don't normally for this one. Item 7, I have not received any petitions. So we now move on to the first substantive item, which is a report on the expansion of childcare for funded entitlements and wraparound care. This is on page 11 of your agenda pack. And I believe you're starting and taking it on. Well done, Tim. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your warm welcome. That's very kind of you. So I'll just start by a brief overview of the paper in front of you today, and then obviously be very happy to answer any questions. And then I can't answer, my colleague Ted will be happy to try and pick up there as well. But this report provides an overview of the work being undertaken in the delivery of the new statutory duty of the expansion of childcare. In 2023, the government announced that funded childcare hours would be extended from 9 months old to support increased parental engagement in work. And the measures expand the offer up to 30 hours of funded childcare per week over 30 weeks. This is a phased rollout with 15 hours over 30 weeks currently being available, increasing to a full-time offer from September 2025. The government's clear ambition is that by 2026, all parents and carers of primary aged children who need it should be able to access term time childcare in the local area from 8 until 6 in the morning till the evening. And the council has a duty to secure sufficient high quality childcare places. Now our sufficiency has been impacted by COVID, coming out of COVID, that has put increased pressure on providers, which has also been compounded by increasing costs in the marketplace. During 24-25, there has been a net overall loss of 412 places. But we have just recently undertaken a sufficiency assessment to support the new and existing capacity, and that work indicates that we will have sufficient capacity come September to provide the extended hours, and we continue to work with providers to open up new providers and also to expand the capacity of those existing ones. Interestingly, the Department for Education data was projected on all providers being full, but that isn't the case locally. So we do have capacity to move into those providers and to fill them up as necessary. So that's a good news story. The other point probably worth touching on is that our apprentices and the workforce capacity is an issue which we're facing across the area, and we're no different from any other local authority area in the country. We are supporting level 3 high caliber candidates through the system. We're monitoring and tracking those workers across the system as they train, and we're linking in with providers at key points to support their development, and also linking in with the training providers as well, which is going down very well and is proving successful. So all in all, a good news story for Leicestershire. We are expecting to meet our statutory duties and the expanded provision for September 25, as we currently are at the current moment in time. But I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I am sorry, Mr. Walker, I should have introduced you as well. Ted Walker, if I may call you that, my Christian name, Head of Service for Education. Have I got that right? Yes, thank you very much. Right, any questions? No? Oh, well, Mr. Hunt.
I'm only doing this because there were no questions, but because we did earlier have a quite a lively discussion about, you know, will we make it? And I'm very pleased to hear Mr. Brown telling us that, you know, we are on track, but the figures that we've got in the report don't fill us with optimism, because, you know, there are so many it would appear that we're not making the ground we need to in order to have the places, the childcare places, but also the wraparound places. So that's our concern. If you could say something about that.
No, certainly. It is quite a confusing picture because the national data that the DfE used didn't reflect our local take-up of places. So we had quite a number of places which were still surplus to capacity. So what we'll be doing is filling those up in addition to opening new providers and working with them, the existing providers, to expand. I think also it's become conflated because we've got three things happening here. We've got the expanded provision, we've also got the breakfast clubs, and we've also got the wraparound support as well. So it's very easy for those three things to become conflated. But at the current moment in time, we are confident that we'll meet our statutory duties. Should that change, then we'll obviously take action to address that. But I have no concerns at this current moment in time.
Yeah, just I'm on, aren't I? Yeah. I just wanted to add that, you know, although we're obviously keen that it's going to go well, it is in essence a really important part of the education provision that we're going to continue to offer in Leicestershire. And it reminds me to some extent, I'm thinking particularly about the breakfast clubs and the wraparound, you know, how you know, we've struggled to keep Sure Start going, and Deborah will tell us it's still going. But this is something of that nature which can enhance the education experience of very young children, which is so important. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Mr. Allen?
Thank you very much, Chair. Just going to paragraph 30 on page number 16. So there's a note that within the last 2 years, 69 childminders have left the sector. Do we do any kind of follow-up with them to find out why they've gone? And if we do, are there any kind of common reasons why people are leaving the sector? Thank you.
Yes, we do. I'll defer to Ted to see whether he knows any particular trends there. But the one most cited to me historically has been the increased costs that the providers are experiencing. So I suspect that's probably it, and it makes their business unsustainable. And I think that Corey's right in stressing the importance of early years provision, and I think you underestimate it at your peril. So we need to do everything we can to support those providers. And what we've done is introduced a business support advisor that can go out and work with those providers in order to increase their sufficiency and ability to cater for the increases in costs which are being experienced across the country, not only through the issues about national insurance, but also the increased energy costs as well.
Just to add that the childminders can typically be quite fluid in any case. So there may be some childminders that don't have any children for that period.
Thank you. Could you send me the details of the business support advisor? I've got a couple of people who might be interested in that. Thank you.
The Hills?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask you to go into a little bit more detail about the work that's been done to get the further places required? In the report, it says that since COVID, there's been a deficit of, I can find the figure, deficit of about approximately 400 places it was, and 412 places. And then we've got to find another 936 by September. So could I just ask you to explain a little bit further, sorry, about how we're going to meet that demand?
Yeah, so the statistics as they're currently stated are based on full-time equivalent places, but we do have capacity in the sector at the moment. So what we'll be doing is looking to fill that capacity already, and also working with providers through our business advisor to expand that provision as well as supporting new providers to come into the market. And Ted's absolutely right. The childcare sector is incredibly fluid, so you can enter the market pretty quickly actually. And that's one mechanism that we can use to increase capacity where we particularly need it. Where there isn't capacity in a particular area, we'll obviously look to develop local provision, but also what we're clear about from our sufficiency assessment is that there is enough capacity within a generality of local areas. So if there isn't particular provision that's suitable to that particular family, they can move across another locality nearby as well.
Mrs. Jordan?
Point 58, it says that historically the council has not held a contingency fund. And I'm just wondering what you're doing to pay off the deficit and to also provide the additional places that are required, where the money's coming from and whether we're going to have sufficient.
Yeah, so there's two slightly different issues here. So as reported, we ended the 2021 financial year with a deficit on the early years block, and that was for a number of reasons, but some of it was around the kind of most basically the money coming in from government and the money that we needed to pay out. So we've been since 21-22 essentially recovering that deficit, so pulling the money back in order to pay off that deficit that we were left with. Separately from that, we historically, as we've reported, we didn't hold a contingency fund. Most local authorities hold a contingency fund in the early years sector. In essence, to support how the budget works. So the budget works on a census position. So the amount of money that the local authority gets in is based on the census position. But actually, sometimes the money that we then need to pay out to providers is more than the money that we get into the system. So we are holding a contingency fund, which essentially means that we've got enough money to pay providers based on the needs of providers rather than on the census data that's submitted at a point in time.
Thank you. I had a point I'd like to raise on page 16 and paragraph 29. I think you've touched on this, Brown, about the apprentices. There is a high dropout rate, which I think is indicated probably across the country. My question really was, do we know why they drop out? And are they, when they apply to become an apprenticeship, do they fully understand what this will entail, or is it they don't know what else to do, or college or school don't, and will try it, because that's very expensive if they're not suitable, but also they could be taking the place of someone who just didn't happen to meet the criteria. I think you said it's a level 3 entry, so if you could just remind me what level 3. I'm of a generation we didn't have level 3, so if you wouldn't mind, thank you.
So it's those candidates operating following school leaving age and are going into college to do it rather than doing it at an earlier stage. So you are looking for higher level candidates that will pursue it as a career later on, given the considerable investment that it does take to go through an apprenticeship. And it does require significant sustainability, and it's a vocation, isn't it? I think really, particularly with this type of work. So it's working through that, and it does take some time to get the qualification, but absolutely we're working with those particular higher caliber candidates, so we can get that high class caliber and capacity in childcare settings, given how important it is. And you're also looking, as we see, special educational needs rising within early years settings. We want to be able to make sure that we can cater for those particular needs as well, given the sustained increase we're experiencing, both in numbers of EHCPs, but also those children and people who are SEN support as well.
Thank you. Is there a pattern of the people that drop out? Is there a pattern for the reasons given, like hours, money, or something? That they've discovered as they partake in, and is there a certain time, or after so many months, or however long it is that when the most dropouts occur?
I don't have that information to hand, but if you forgive me, I'll send that over to you afterwards, if that's okay.
Thank you very much. That's fine. Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Chair. My next question is on the breakfast clubs. So obviously there is an aim to provide a breakfast club for 30 minutes for all children in all schools. And I think often you get admirable national aims like these, but ultimately it falls down to the council or individual schools to deliver on these promises. It seems wise to have had a sort of pilot, and I see we've got 18 Leicestershire primary schools are early adopters. I'm just curious, with those early adopters, have we had any feedback on how well the programme's running?
It is very early. We've now reduced to 8 in Leicestershire. There are 4 academies, 4 LA maintained schools and 1 special school. It's probably a bit early to say yet, but we can certainly bring a report back later on to let you know what's happening.
If I could push it a little bit more, so you don't know why those 10 schools have pulled out at all?
I think they probably, some of them looked at the offer, and some of them made informed decisions over the budget, over the capacity of staffing they've got, and the implications for their entire settings. But again, we can provide a full analysis of that later on if that's helpful.
Perfect, and that would be great. And then it sort of goes on to my second thought, which was, it says in the report that it's funded directly by the Department for Education. My worry is this one of these things that will happen for a couple of years, then that money will fall onto the council to provide. Obviously, we've got incredibly tight budgets, and I don't think that's something that we would be able to fund at all. But it sounds like if they're not really paying the school as much as it is, maybe we won't have to eventually.
If the government wanted to continue, they would need to fund it in some way, shape or form, because you're quite right. There isn't capacity in the current system and the funding arrangements to meet those obligations. I think probably we'll also be having a debate around the level of funding as well at some point going forward, given that some of the feedback we've already received is that the amount per child for a breakfast club is very low.
This is Taylor.
Yeah, just to add a little bit more to the breakfast clubs. I mean, because it's not means tested at all, it's open to every single child, and the cost per pupil is 60p to provide them not only with staff looking at them, but provide them with food. And I think the point of how many schools just in Leicestershire have dropped out, just as a pilot, I think shows that the ability to safely safeguard and staff the amount of pupils that they are and provide them with a breakfast for 60p per pupil is just not doable. And I think the pilot, as it rolls out, will show that schools just don't have the ability to do that for 60p. And I think the other bit about the early years provider, I think the sector is incredibly difficult as it is now. And I think as we move towards April with the national insurance increases and the national living wage increases, I think they will get squeezed more and more and more. So I think we're in a real difficult position with the early years provider. We'll do all we can, but if they're not sustainable, they're not going to be able to last. And the national insurance increase is definitely going to hit them, and they're not going to be helped by the government either. So I think we're in two sticky situations with some of the government policies going forward that are not going to help our children and families going forward. So I am really concerned about where we're heading after April when some of these changes come in, but we will obviously keep a really close eye on it. As Tim said, he's over the brief already very, very quickly as to what the issues are. But yeah, I am really concerned about whether we're going to provide this for the funding that they get. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think that's no more. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from Mrs. Taylor, really. So I think it is a commendable thing that the government are trying to do, provide a breakfast for every child, but obviously 60 pence allocation per child, and there's a recent article where it says it's going to cost around about £1.80 in real terms. So, you know, obviously with that deficit, and this is only, like, quite rightly, as Mrs. Taylor said, it's only going to go up with the NI increases. It's just not sustainable. And when you look at one section of society, such as the pensioners that are being means tested now and are living below the poverty line, yet we're now switching and giving every child a breakfast, you know, millionaires, families and things like that. It just really, to me, just doesn't make sense. So I think it's something that the government do need to look at and perhaps perhaps, that was a good one, yeah, perhaps reconsider and look at it again.
Thank you very much. I see no further hands. Mrs. Taylor, did you want to come back on anything else?
No, thank you, Chair. That was 2 points I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, thank you very much, Tim, and thank you very much, Ted. And we now move on to item 2, which is well, it's the next item is agenda item 9, which starts on page 31 of your agenda pack, and it is the Department of Education statutory guidance for the use of agency children and family social workers. And Sharon, I believe we'll take us through this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the purpose of the report is to provide the committee with an overview of the local authority duties and responsibilities under these new regulations that were published in September 2024 and came into force on the 31st of October of last year. The regulations are duties for the use of agency social workers only in children's services. So it doesn't include agency social workers in adult services. It is primarily focused on the children's market. And the purpose of the report is also to provide you with the update on the use of agency social workers in the department. So the regulations came into force in October, and as Appendix A, I have attached a copy of those regulations so members can see the full detail of what's included. This is obviously the first time that the committee has been provided with information about the regulations because they are still fairly new. But this committee has received regular updates on our work against our departmental recruitment and retention strategy and the associated work to not only attract and recruit qualified social work staff, but also to provide the environment that retains those staff working for us. Paragraph 5 of the report outlines in the background that the Association of Directors for Children's Services, so the ADCS, has worked over a period of time with the Department of Education to address the national shortage of permanent social workers in children's services and the growth over a number of years of the agency market. And I guess in fairness, the hold that the agency market has had on local authorities by the increased need and demand for those workers. The cost of agency staff has increased significantly over the last few years, and that's become both a financial difficulty and burden for local authorities in paying out for those workers, but it's also led to a greater transition of workers between authorities, some instability in the workforce, especially for some local authorities, and most importantly, in cases that's led to disruption for children and families where there is a constant turnover of staff coming in and out of those children's lives, and that in turn can lead to drift and delay. So the guidance, key legislation and guidance as a recap for the committee, and I know we've presented before that in 2023, Stable Homes Built on Love provided a review of social care, identified some key areas of work, and was saying that it was an opportunity in a generation to reset how children's social care was and is delivered. We then had a revision of Working Together to Safeguard Children, and then in November, that should say November 24 actually, not November 25. I've just noticed that premonition. The government outlined their vision and commitment to progressing and embedded the changes outlined in the aforementioned publications and documentation when they published Keeping Children Safe, Helping Families Thrive, and I have attached a copy of that as an appendix for members to be able to see and read the whole document. The legislative changes that will come about with creating and providing some of this vision and changes is outlined in the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill, which is currently proceeding through Parliament. So in relation to the one key element of those documents outlined is that the success of the areas of development and the focus and the principles can only be met if we have a stable workforce who are there, permanent workforce, who can provide high quality services to children, young people and their families when that resource and service is required. So to address those issues, the regulations that I'm presenting to the committee today were agreed and were published. So in summary, there's a clear statement that local authorities may continue to use agency staff where that is seen to be an appropriate resourcing option, but any use of agency staff must be in line with the guidance. And in paragraph 10, I've outlined in detail the different areas of those regulations, which move through the principles of how we contract, where agency staff come from, to us providing, all local authorities will need to provide on a quarterly basis data to the Department of Education on our use of agency staff, how much we pay them, that we have clear oversight of their qualifications and their time in employment. There are some parts of the regulations that we don't need to focus on here in the committee, and that's in relation to project teams. So some authorities have employed via agencies whole teams of people that have come in called project teams, but basically have normally gone into authorities who were really struggling and they've needed to put a whole team in a particular part of their service delivery. We fortunately have not been in that position, and it's not a position or an area that we would want to have to go down. The guidance also look at trying to stabilise where agency staff come in, that continual turnover of staff. So they have impose that local authorities need to give agency staff a 4 weeks notice period or a period associated with that level of post, and as a basic social work post it will be 4 weeks, but in the same vein that there is an emphasis that agency staff should give local authorities that period of notice. So this is to try and take away from a position that some authorities have been in, where agency staff have started on a Monday and then they've said on Wednesday they're leaving and they've gone on the Friday. So by the time you've allocated some children to them, they've made a decision to leave, which is obviously not good for anybody involved. And one of the other key areas, which is wholeheartedly supported and welcomed, is that to be an agency social worker, there is an expectation that before becoming agency or before presenting themselves in agency, they have worked in a local England local authority for 3 years in a permanent social work role, and that is significant. The Association of Directors pushed for that to be 5 years. It was settled that it's 3 years, but that is significant, and significant as we come into some of the detail, that they, over a number of years, a lot of social workers after their first year in practice have gone into the agency market. And some of them have moved around authorities quite significantly. They are now in a position that when their current assignment after the 31st of October ends, they cannot work as an agency worker until they get 3 years in permanent employment. The other key area of the regulations is that there is an expectation that local authorities will provide a detailed reference for somebody who's worked for them. And again, that's to minimise the risk that people whose practice is not as we would expect it to be move around authorities at quite a rate, really. Paragraph 11 outlines that as regions have been asked to come together and look at a memorandum of understanding between local authorities about how we will implement the regulations and how across the regions we will support director to director, ensuring that the regulations are implemented and that we take a grip on the use of agency staff. So in the East Midlands, we have signed up to that memorandum as part of, and another key element of that memorandum and the regulations is that there is an agreement that somebody leaving a permanent social work post in one authority in the region can't go as an agency worker to another authority in the region for 6 months. So that has been implemented as well, and it's all about trying to minimise people moving from permanent post to agency. So Leicestershire has been proactively involved in both the regional and national discussions with the Department of Education around these regulations, and we've also continued to implement a strong recruitment and retention strategy that promotes Leicestershire as the place social workers want to practice. The service currently has 52 agency social workers engaged. That number, to put into context, has reduced from 68 last year in 2024 and was 76 in 23. So it's just to show that the numbers are reducing, and month on month we are reducing and keep a tight oversight of the use of those agency staff. A number of the agency staff are against vacant posts, but some are where we have agreed to provide additionality if we've had a particular issue that we've been addressing in an area, or it could be that we've been supporting our newly qualified staff to make sure we give them the right support in their first year, where we've had a number of newly qualified staff in a service area. We've put in some extra capacity from experienced agency staff to make sure that the newly qualified staff get the best introduction to the career and the profession. Paragraph 14 outlines that we have had 4 agency social workers that have moved to take up permanent employment with the council. We have had some other successful agency move over, but they've tended to be more at the management level of post. So this figure is the frontline social workers that I'm giving to you. And paragraph 15 outlines where we are currently with our vacancies and our recruitment process. We've worked, paragraph 16 outlines that we've worked with HR colleagues and specialist recruitment, company Reed, to make sure that our staff are within the negotiated contract by the local authority, and I'm pleased to say that any that weren't within the Reed contract have now been moved over. So that's a significant development, and financially is a good development for the local authority. So now our agency staff are very clearly all on contract. There is still a risk that we do struggle still, although we've seen improvement in the recruitment of staff. We've seen a lot of activity and some innovative ways of recruiting staff and attracting them to Leicestershire. You will know from the the information that Ofsted reported when they completed our inspection last year, that staff speak very positively about working for the authority and feel very well supported by their teams and their line managers. So that work to make sure that Leicestershire is a chosen place to work and practice as a social worker is something that we continue to focus on very much as part of our recruitment and retention. That gives the overview, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sharon. Mrs. Taylor, did you want to add anything at this stage?
Just to add that I think regionally we're in a really good position. I know there's a lot of hard work gone into that with Regional College to make sure that we're all the same, because what we were happening with staff were flitting from local authority to local authority, and that gives no stability for any of us within the region. So I'm really pleased that we've come together and we're all working together to ensure the best for children across the region, not only Leicestershire. So no, I do welcome that work.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments people would like to make? No? Good. Mrs. Page.
Thank you. As all the reports, they are very good reports, and thank you for all of that detailed information, because it really helped me to understand. I think that I don't like red tape, but I think this report in particular is most welcome, because it really covers all of the loose ends and make sure there is additional safety. And I just have a general question. Paragraph 10, which outlines your duties, which reflects page 46 in the appendix. Does that add additional stress, additional cost to the system? I mean, talk me through that a little bit. As I'm saying, I welcome it and it's necessary, but I'd like to know what the implications are cost-wise and resources-wise. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think it gives us, I don't think it puts an additional cost burden on the local authority. I think we have been in a strong position to ensure that oversight of the use of agency and the review of agency. And if anything, it's given us a strength of making sure that any agency staff that had come via a different agency, we've been able to move to Reed, which financially is a benefit for the local authority. One of the things we want to be in a position to do is start to tackle the fees that agencies charge us. And I think as we get all these things in place, it will put local authorities in a stronger position to do that. But the working together, the memorandum of understanding are all things that we've been building across the region and within the local authority for some time. What we are currently looking at is there are some agency staff who haven't got the 3 years experience, and we're working with them about them moving hopefully into permanent posts with us, because they can't go and work anywhere else once their assignment with us ends. They'll not be able to practice as an agency social worker. So if that is as successful as we think it will be, that will actually reduce some costs, because it will reduce some of our agency. And the additional part in to all that I've just said is about the quarterly returns that we need to do. But we've worked with our HR colleagues and Reed, who are our supplier, for them to have a system in place that they can collate that data. So now that's not cost us anything, and now that system's in place, they'll be able to pull that data through.
Thank you. May I just come back with, and you're saying with working regionally, do you think now everybody is working together and singing from one same hymn sheet, besides all the regulation being the same, but could that eventually be used to affect the cost to negotiate an all-over price that is to benefit?
Yeah, that's exactly how that will be the next stage of the work, that as authorities work tightly together, it gives less opportunity for agencies to play authorities off against each other. So it really is important that we work really hard to stick to the regulations.
Thank you very much. I see no further comment. Mrs. Taylor, did you have anything else to add?
No, nothing else to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now move on to agenda item 10, which is on page 127 of your agenda pack, and this is the Children's Innovation Partnership report of the Director of Children and Family Services. So over to you, Jane.
Thank you, Chair. So the report today sets out an update really on our Children's Innovation Partnership, which is that particular focus around building residential homes for our children. So across paragraphs 2 to 5, we set out the detail around our statutory duties, so ensuring that we've got the right places for our children in care to live. And I know that we have previously presented here the placement sufficiency statement and market position statement that sets out what the needs are for our children across Leicestershire. So by way of background, and as again we reported at last committee, the demand for children and family services continues to increase, and we are projecting growth of 41 million over the period of the MTFS, and predominantly that growth is around children's placements, or the cost of children's placements, both in terms of demographic growth, but also some of the changing complexity of our children, and therefore costs to meet those complexities. And at the moment, across the country and in Leicestershire, the market sufficiency is poor, it's inflexible, and the kind of increased demand means that there is a seller's market, which is meaning nationally and locally it's becoming increasingly difficult for local authorities to influence the market, and costs are increasing significantly. The other thing that's impacting our weekly costs is around the level of need of our children as well, and therefore the kind of support that's required to support children within their placements, as well as the kind of increasing age of children coming into our care, and some of the needs that have led to breakdowns of family-based placements and children's homes. So in paragraph 8, we've just outlined what the average weekly cost at the moment is for residential placement, and it's increased from 4.8k a year in 2023, and it now exceeds £6,000 a week. So the costs to place children in residential provision are significant. So there are a whole range of private providers operating in Leicestershire, but often our children aren't prioritised for those places, partly because the provider does need to match children to a home, so need to make sure that those children are suitable for the home and suitably matched to other children living in the home as well. But also with the increasing complexity, it does mean that providers are able to, in essence, choose which children they provide placements for as well. So in response to all of these pressures that have been ongoing for many years now, we embarked some time back now on a partnership with Barnardo's to essentially look at what we could do in Leicestershire for our children in terms of building children's homes. And we regularly review that position. And in the context of all of the description I've given, we know that response or us building internal homes remains relevant for children across Leicestershire as well. So by way of update, in terms of our homes in Leicestershire, we started out in 2019 with a kind of phase 1 approach and identified some capital funding to build 2 homes initially. We did a whole raft of analytical work to really understand what kind of homes we'd want to build across Leicestershire. Following that, we successfully bid into the Department of Education, which enabled us to run another two phases. So we have 3 phases of build for children's homes now across the county. So really pleased that we've now got 4 of our own homes now open and operating well. The first one that was opened is a what we call a parent and baby assessment unit. That opened a year ago now, and the home is set up to provide a supportive environment for parents to go with their children, where they can really focus on the needs of their children and learn how to be the very best parents. And often these parents are on the brink of being separated from their children, and the placements are ordered by the court. So the placement is specifically designed in terms of its building to allow for both assessment to take place as well as supporting parents to become more successful around parenting. The other 2 homes that are open is the old post office and Marjorie House, which support our children who have emotional, behavioural and developmental needs. And we've got a home that's open called Jarvis House, which is an emergency and assessment home as well. We have got a further 3 homes that are almost ready to open. We are just waiting for Ofsted to come out and register. Ofsted have to register all children's homes. We're just waiting for Ofsted to come out in order to register those homes, but they're on track to be opened kind of towards the end of April now. And those are homes for children with emotional, behavioural and development needs, a contextual safeguarding home, and a home that will provide overnight short breaks. And then the final home, which we're going to call Ivan House, is a new build, and it's in its very final stages of being built. And we're hopeful that home will be open in July 25. So that will mean that all of the homes that we have planned to build and have open will be open this year. And we continue to look at our demand. We continue to look at the profile of our children as well, in order to make sure that we fully understand the needs, in order to continue to make sure the homes are fit for purpose, but also to consider what else we might need to develop or build for our children as well. Just briefly on resource implications, the total capital investment so far has been 6.1 million, and you'll see that just over 4 million of that was a capital investment from the local authority, and just under 2 million was some match funding that we got from the Department for Education, which meant we could open more homes. And again, we continue to look at the financial benefits. There are 2 benefits to us having our homes. There are the benefit of having our children placed in homes that we run, but there is also a financial benefit as well, because those homes are on average cheaper to run than those that are provided by the private market. And you can see here that we are forecasting that the financial benefit of our internal homes will total 2.2 million across the period of the MTFS, and we continue to keep that review as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody got any? Mrs. Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me in. I just want to say how amazing it has been. I was at the start of this project when I was Cabinet Support Member to Ivan Old, and I'm glad that the final home will be a celebration of the work that he did for children and families in Leicestershire by calling that house Ivan House. So that's a nod to him for all his hard work. But I think for me, this has been an exceptional project that we've done with Barnardo's. Being with it from the very beginning to see what it's going into now, I'm immensely proud of it, and I'll challenge everyone that doesn't agree with me, because it has been an absolutely fantastic adventure for us all. And I think the bottom line is this provides really good homes for our really complex children. They're well looked after, they're near their families, they're near their communities, they're near all the social workers and all those partners that help make improvements to their lives. And you know, just to say these houses are just for them to really regulate themselves and hopefully move them either back home or into foster carers. So for me, this has been an amazing project. And I thank Jane and the whole team that have led from the beginning of this, and some people that led with it are no longer with us. They've moved on to pastures new. But for me, this has been a really fantastic project. So I'm really, really proud of it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Taylor. Mrs. Page.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the report. And by the looks of things, you're all very, very pleased with yourself and the way this is going. So congratulations. And I've got a really off-the-wall question. So as this is an ever-changing landscape, and no matter what you do, there will never be enough. But it read in para 18, the demand and profile modelling exercises continue to be undertaken. So it made me think you have got a modelling exercise and whatever, and the need for these places, no doubt, over time will grow, especially with our building agenda, having an awful lot of asylum seekers, affordable housing. So I was wondering, do you work or intend to work with local authorities to put this into the system to get some Section 106 as part of you know, the housing agenda? So if you're talking 40% affordable housing and you have to split it to special needs and whatever, well, there could be a part of that that would reflect this need, and you know, builders might do something that accommodates that. And I was wondering what your thoughts are on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a really good question, a really important one. I think just two things. One, on the kind of changing demographics and demand, we continue to have a look at that in terms of the needs of our children. And actually, one of the things that we did do was we changed the focus of one of the homes prior to us opening it, because we realised we needed more provision to support children with emotional and mental health difficulties. So one of the advantages of us running them in-house is that we can, we need to go through quite a robust process to do it, but we can flex the needs of the home and kind of look at how that's registered. So that means that we make sure that whatever we are developing is the right homes. In terms of demographic growth, that's challenging. The planning obligation policy doesn't include a kind of yield for the number of children in care. So it's a challenge, and actually because the numbers are really low, so they wouldn't necessarily statistically fall out of a planning. I think the point you make around working with builders around what kind of provision could be available for our children is a really good point, because that's a kind of slightly separate issue around how we influence the market in developing and working with private providers to also develop provision for our children as well. So I know that builders already kind of work with private providers to say, you know, could you use this home for a children's home and things. So I think it's certainly a relationship that we could think about in terms of what else we might want to develop within Leicestershire for our children. But the planning obligations policy doesn't cover any yield for children in care. The numbers are really small, so it wouldn't statistically be significant anyway. But we are doing outside of the work we're doing around building children's homes, we are looking at how we work with the private market to look at how we can shape that for our children in Leicestershire as well, so that we've got a number of different things. And obviously, not forgetting alongside this, we continue to develop our in-house foster carers as well, because obviously we want to also develop family-based placements for our children. So this sits as part of an overall strategy of how we're developing the best homes for our children, be that residential or family-based as well.
Mr. Hunt.
Just a quick observation that I'm very pleased to see paragraph 13 onwards, the work we've been doing to establish our own homes. And in relation to what Deborah Taylor's saying, it's really interesting to hear name Ivan Old, because he was one of the greats of this authority, along with several directors of education. And I just think it underlines what special work our officers do and what is special about this scrutiny committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else want to come back? No, but we'll move on to item 11 on page 131 of your pack, which is the Q3 24-25 performance report, and it's a joint report of the Chief Executive and Director of Children and Family Services. And I believe Sharon and Tim, you're taking us through this. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Chair. So the report, as you know, is a regular report that comes to the committee to show the our performance against certain agreed performance indicators that are set as part of the planning across the department, but also are things that we need to report back more nationally and regionally against. So it doesn't include everything that we look at as part of our performance, but it does include some key indicators. So paragraph 5 says that from the 9 measures that are reported to have a national benchmark, we are in the top quartile for 1. We've got 4 in the second quartile, 3 in the third, and 1 is in the fourth, which is the bottom quartile. So taking us through those, or taking you through those details, if I take you through those performance areas that are in my part of the directorate, and then I'll hand over to Tim to take you through the early years and education performance. So paragraph 7, the percentage of child protection cases reviewed within timescale has gone down slightly in this last quarter. It is important to mention that although the quarterly reports are important, we monitor this performance on a monthly basis at the senior management team, and we do keep an eye on what is the overall year data, which is obviously an important data as well. So there is, because we're showing it quarter by quarter, there can be some slight fluctuation in those figures, but just to reassure that we look on a monthly basis at the detail behind what the performance is saying, and if need be, we take any action to address the performance. What I can tell you around the review of child protection conferences, as a for instance, is any of those conferences that don't take place in timescale are signed off at a senior manager level, and the rationale for those conferences not taking place is fully understood. So it could be that the family couldn't attend for some reason. It could be that all the agencies couldn't be there on a particular date. So the decision made was the right decision for that family and the review of their family circumstances, but obviously we keep a tight hold and eye over the numbers of reviews. So they were the child protection reviews. Percentage of children becoming subject to a child protection plan for a second or subsequent time increased in the last quarter. You will know that this is a percentage, a performance target that we've done a lot of work on, and we have a close eye on, and it is subject to going up and down in a quarterly basis. Our numbers of children on a child protection plan have come down over recent years, which is positive, but that does then mean that you some months only need 2 families who have a number of children within those families to go on to a child protection plan for a second or subsequent time, and that will skew that percentage figure. So it doesn't mean we don't keep a close eye on it. We audit on a monthly basis any children that are in this category, so we understand the detail. What I can reassure you of is that these are not children that are going on and off a child protection plan at a speedy rate. They tend to be children that are coming back onto a plan in over a 2-year period since the last period of them being on a plan. And one of the main factors that determines this figure is children who live where there is domestic abuse. So that has a significant impact on that child and their circumstances. But to reassure, we do keep a close eye on it. Percentage of re-referrals was 26.2%, similar to what it was in the previous quarter. We do have a target of trying to get that to 22%. That's our target. So we are some way off that and are focusing some work on it. Then shows percentage of assessments that are completed in 45 days. And then goes on to our care leaver data, where we always perform really well. So that's against young people care leavers in suitable accommodation, those keeping in contact with us, and those where we look at them being in education, employment or training. Paragraph 13 is the percentage of children in care of dental checks, so that has decreased slightly. We want that to be higher. We are ambitious for that to be higher, but in the context of some of the pressures that have been around securing dentists, we have seen a real improvement in that figure over the last 12 months. And then the percentage of children who had their annual health assessment is in the 83.9%. So that is a slight decrease from the last quarter. We do understand the details. We would encourage all children to have their health assessment. We do keep a focus on some of our older young people who don't want to attend those health appointments, will be included in that figure. So just to reassure how we monitor and keep oversight of those numbers. So that really takes you through the detail from social care. The youth justice statistics identifies there that the local data is not available, but we are as part of our developments around the electronic system do have that data, and we are monitoring that data, so hope to be able to bring it to one of these meetings in the near future. So if I hand over to Tim, he'll take you through the early years and education, and then at the end, happy to answer any questions.
Sharon. So first of all, just going to paragraph 17, which is the numbers of children in mainstream schools within the EHCP. We've seen a slight fall in that, and we know that we are lower than the national anyway. So there's some further work to do there. A lot of our work in improving SEND services locally is focused on how we can meet children's needs with the HCPs in mainstream schools particularly. So that work will continue and will impact that information. Moving on to paragraph 20, it's pleasing to see the percentage of primary schools rated good or outstanding has increased by 0.5%, although further work again to be done there, given that we are below the national still, but very pleasing in comparison to the secondary, where we've gone up by 6.8%, which is really good to see. So the work that's going on there. And then looking at going to paragraph 23, the numbers of children who are electively home educated, whilst it's gone up by 155, you would ordinarily expect it to increase at this time of year. So that comes as no surprise, and it will probably increase further between now and the end of the academic year. And then those children who are in year 11 will drop off the list. Probably worth saying that the government is looking to introduce new guidelines and a new register for children and young people who are EHE, which I really welcome, because it's one of those areas that does keep me awake at night, because you don't know what you don't know, and those children who are out of sight, but not necessarily out of mind. So it's good that we can have a focus on those particular children and young people. And then just moving on to paragraph 25, we've seen that the numbers of children and young people not in education, employment or training was 0.97%. That's a slight increase, but well below our target. So again, a really good news story. In terms of early years on the dashboard, you'll see that the eligible 20 years 2 and 3-year-olds taking up their free entitlement in high quality provision has fallen slightly, but that's compared to the fact that we have increased quite significantly the numbers of children and young people who are taking up their offer overall, and we'll continue to work with those settings who aren't yet good or outstanding to improve the quality of their provision. But very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions? Mr. Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things. Firstly, I just wanted to highlight paragraph 17, which I had to read it several times, and it's perhaps an example. Sometimes we get statistics which are not comparable one with another on different bases or whatever. And this one says that mainstream schools in Leicestershire figure for EHCPs was 2,500 in autumn 224. This is 108 children lower than summer. And then it says the autumn term numbers are the highest on record. It didn't quite didn't quite make sense to me. But the general point is that when we get figures like these, it's important to have all the figures to the same base or to the same period of time or whatever it may be, and I just found that very confusing. But the performance, which we're really concerned with here, is it was the ones at the end, particularly the re-referrals to CSC within 12 months, and the other one somewhere there. Anyway, wasn't really satisfactory. The figure was 26%, 26.2%, and that's compared with a target of 26.3, so that was judged to be okay. But that figure still seemed pretty high, 26.2%, getting re-referred for CSC within 12 months. Now Sharon's pointed out that sometimes, the end numbers, the number we're dealing with is quite low, and therefore you've only got to have an unfortunate family leaving the area or arriving the area, and they swing about like that. But is the county getting full, surveillance over CSC? And perhaps the officers could say what they feel about that in particular. Thank you.
Thank you. So if I just pick up the question around paragraph 17, so apologies, I think it's not written as clearly as it could be. You're absolutely right. So just to be clear, what the report is saying is that the 2,566 numbers of EHCPs is 108 lower than the summer term. So we've seen a kind of drop, but that the autumn term figures are the highest they've ever been for the autumn term. So apologies, it's not written clearly. It's comparing the autumn term to the autumn term at the end of the second sentence. But actually what overall we're saying is that the numbers have dropped compared to the summer term. So we will take your points around we will do. Yeah, apologies. It's clumsily written, so we'll make sure we pick that up. Just in terms of the question around the percentage of re-referrals, just to be clear, the target for the percentage of re-referrals is 18%, which is why we're showing as red, because we're currently sitting at 26.2%. The 26.3% is the figures that were last period. So the reason we're red is because our performance is below the target as well. So again, which obviously shows that it's something we're working on. And Sharon can describe the oversight that happens within children's social care, because this is one of the performance indicators that, as Sharon described in the introduction, there is a really robust monthly oversight of data. But Sharon will talk about the oversight.
Thanks, Jane. Yes, so this is everything, every child and every family that's referred into children's social care. For some of those children who were referred to us, the decision may be made at the point of referral that they don't require a service from children's social care. We might do some checks and we might link them. Sometimes we might link them into our targeted family help. So it's not that they're not getting a service, it's just that it's deemed at that time not to require a social work service. They can be families that come in for such a set of circumstances, and at that moment in time it's right that they go to targeted family help or another service, but then something else happens that results in another referral, which leads then to an assessment by social care. So what we try and unpick for those children is, was there anything in the initial information that came to us that means we should have done an assessment at that point rather than they go to another service, or were we making the right decision at that time, but it's just that circumstances, something else has happened. So we interrogate those numbers really very closely. There has been an increased number of referrals into our front door over the last several months. Some of that's been for a variety of reasons, but some of that could be linked to some things that are happening nationally that mean that people then make more referrals to us. And it could be that sometimes those circumstances come in, don't initially require an assessment, but something comes back to us. People are concerned and rightly have a worry, but it doesn't always mean that the worry requires a social care response, but we have a duty to screen, to look at the information. They are all children that would be included in a re-referral. So our focus is the work that we do at our front door and with our partner agencies to make sure that thresholds are understood, make sure that children get the right level of service from the start, and that children aren't over-assessed. We're not overly intervening when we don't need to, but actually we do identify those children that require a service from someone, and we make sure that that someone and that area provides that service straight away. So the numbers of re-referrals are looked at not only in the number each month, but we do regular audits of those children to understand the circumstances and understand whether there is any learning that needs to be fed back into the service, or whether there are issues that needs to be looked at with partner agencies, for instance, because it's sometimes about anxieties and issues that are held by partner agencies. So the figure is higher than we would want it to be. We are focused on it. We don't make excuses for it. We interrogate what's behind those numbers and figures, and we make sure that that's oversight so that we can be driving that figure down. And as Jane said, we would want to see it, at 20% or just under would be what most authorities would see as being an okay number, because there will always be circumstances that require a re-referral.
Thank you. Thank you. Madam. Oh, Mrs. Page, sorry.
Yes, just two very quick one, if I may, please. My question was going to be, why have the percentage gone down in the healthcare check? But why there? And you explained it very well. But then you kind of said, but there are some of the older children that refuse the help, which went. So surely, as as we are the care provider and we have a responsibility to their well-being, why can they refuse it? Because a health check and a dental check is paramount to their well-being and in the long run. So, you know, why can they refuse it? You know, what can we do to encourage that? And then my next question is, it was the number of homeschooling. To question that. In the numbers, I do appreciate we just collect the numbers and whatever. And but do the numbers include gypsy travellers and show people's children? Because I remember many years ago, we used to get a separate report where it was all lined out. I assume you will say yes. And it says then the numbers will continue to be monitored closely. So yes, we are monitoring the numbers. However, can we also monitor outcomes? Because if we have an increased number of children that are being homeschooled, do we know that the homeschooling is adequate to meet the needs of the children, to benefit them? Because I can take my children every day to an amusement park or to London and say, well, I'm teaching them history or whatever, but it doesn't necessarily provide the right outcomes. And thank you for the report.
Thank you. Really good questions. Yes, they do include all children who are EHE, regardless of their background and ethnicity. Monitoring is a really tricky one. The legislative framework is pretty vague around the monitoring and doesn't allow for any monitoring of final outcomes. So if they get an exam, if they get a qualification through an examination, which some do, there's no requirement for parents to inform us of that. But we do monitor the quality of education during the course of the academic year. It's quite a broad framework, so it does cause some concerns in terms of traditional outcomes that you'd expect through final terminal exams, but it has to be suitable for the aptitude and background of the child. So it is a much broader outcomes framework, and not all of those outcomes would be what we traditionally would expect from a mainstream school.
Just to add to that, I think the kind of breakdown of data that you referred to is when we've brought reports on our inclusion service, which includes our children missing education. Tim's absolutely right. The electively home educated cohort would include those children who are electively home educated as part of our traveller community. But the report that you refer to is our inclusion report, where we break down those children that we're worried about around children missing education. I think that report is due to come to the June scrutiny. So we'll be able to go over the detail in a little bit more detail there as well.
No, hang on. How can we encourage uptake in health checks and dental checks? Because I'm very keen on that.
With an 18-year-old.
Exactly. Yeah, I think to reassure, I guess there's two key elements to this. One is that understandably and rightly, children that come into our care, because most of them and what they've experienced before they've come into care, have a level of health need that is over and above what other children who've been in, supporting, loving homes all their life. So the need for that level of health check and oversight is there. But we do need to remember that in relation to health checks, our children in care go for more health checks than children who are at home. So you have to put this in a context of that. If you're at school with your peers and you happen to be a child in care, you are being asked to go for more health checks than your friends who are living at home with the family. So we just have to understand the context of it. This is not something that every child has to do, and we've got a problem that some of our children in care aren't doing it. This is something additional that's there for our children in care for all the right reasons that I've said, but we do have to understand the context of it. And we do a lot of work via our Children in Care Council and now our Aftercare Council, working with young people to understand what are the health issues that really matter to them, and in particular, their mental health and well-being, and how do we ensure that they get the right level of services. So we're working with our young people to say, how do we best deliver this, and how do we best engage you to help meet your health needs. And when I say we're working, that includes our health colleagues who provide the Looked After Children health service. So I just want to reassure, I guess, inform you the context of this, but also reassure about what work we're doing with young people, our children, and with our colleagues, our partner agencies. But we do, and what we do most definitely need to make sure is that those youngsters get access to the right health provision and services that they need as they grow and develop. So we keep an eye on those figures. We look at those as part of their review of arrangements each year to make sure that we've not got any young children who have got a really significant or any health issue that's not being addressed. But we do have to acknowledge that when you get to 14 plus, toddling off for a health assessment when your friends aren't doing it is not the coolest of things to do. And some youngsters will do that. Some youngsters can be encouraged to do it. Our health colleagues are looking at other ways of doing that so that they engage the children and young people. But we have to accept that some of the older ones really don't want to go for all the health assessments. And if they go for some, which is important, that because they don't go for all of them, it affects the percentage. But actually we have to focus in on those individual children and making sure they're getting what they need.
Thank you. Deborah, did you want to come back?
No, nothing else for
Okay.
me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Mr. Ellett.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick point. So the children who are educated at home, do we have a mechanism for kind of keeping in regular contact with them? I'm just thinking of the case of Sarah Sharif, where she was kind of pulled out of school and homeschooled to actually hide injuries. Thank you.
Yeah, so the space around electively home education is a complex one in terms of what the requirements are for local authorities, and obviously it sits within the raft of responsibilities we have of keeping children across the partnership of keeping children safe. So in terms of electively home educators, Tim described, we have a certain set of duties really to make sure that elective home education is of good quality. So it's more about the education, and what comes with that is a requirement for a kind of annual check. So it's a relatively loose requirement or limited requirement around us managing the electively home education. But alongside that, obviously, we have duties to ensure that all children across Leicestershire are safeguarded. So we'll utilise the kind of home education framework that will enable us to make sure that those children are safe. Actually, the Children and Family Wellbeing Bill that is going through Parliament at the moment is including a revised requirement around those children who are on a child protection plan or a child in need plan for the local authority to make a decision or an assessment as to whether home education is suitable for that child. Now that will be really helpful because at the moment we don't have the ability to say no. If a parent chooses to take their child out of education, then we don't really have an ability at the moment to say no, we don't think that's a good idea. We would always encourage children to be in school. But actually this new duty will mean that we can make the assessment and we can make a decision about whether home education is suitable for those children as well. I think in the context of cases like Sarah Sharif, there's a wider safeguarding partnership responsibility for those children where either they're not in education or they're not having regular contact with other agencies as well, which is what's kind of fallen out of the learning from the tragic case of Sarah as well. But you're right, the home education legislation meant that her parents were able to take her out of school and educate her at home. And as a local authority, we do have a duty, and we do kind of monitor the safeguarding of those arrangements as well. But the new bill is going to enable us to do that even more robustly.
Thank you very much. Right, the date of the next meeting is scheduled to take place on the 3rd of June 2025. And item 13, as stated at the start of the meeting, I have no urgent items. So thank you all very much for attending, and I declare the meeting, and welcome, Tim. And I hope we haven't put you off. Thank you. Bye.